Hi there, this is Solituron from Solituron Films, and welcome to another episode of Double Take. Today we're having a quick look at two modern masters doing Jidaigeki films, or Japanese period films, or chanbara. You know, chanbara are more traditional sword fighting films, whereas these two have sword fighting in them, but they're still under the Jidaigeki umbrella. So we have Killing by Shinya Sakamoto from 2018, and we have Zaitoichi the Blind Swordsman from Takeshi Kitano in 2003. Obviously these two modern masters are kind of more famous for not doing period films. Kitano's more famous for doing gangster films or crime films, even though his crime films are a little bit deeper and more special than your standard fare. And obviously Sakamoto is famous for quote-unquote body horror, but that's not really what he's about. It's more about the evolution of man using technology and machinery from the Stone Ages up to the present day. So Sakamoto talks in this Third Window release, which also has Haze and the Adventures of Denshu Kozu, about how Jidaigeki films for Japanese filmmakers, they kind of grew up with those kind of films, the original Zaitoichi series, films of Kurosawa and people like that, and how it's always something in the back of Japanese filmmakers to do a Jidaigeki or a chanbara film. So it's how these modern masters make the Jidaigeki their own, put their own stamp on them, whether these films still fit into the canon of these two filmmakers. So Zaitoichi, in typical Kitano fashion, he stars as Zaitoichi, who's blonde, but he's not actually in the film that much. There's two kind of stories that he pretty much just gets involved with, but there's a lot of time spent in the film not following Zaitoichi as the blind masseur, or is he? So you have a brother and sister, geishas, who are hell-bent on revenge for the gang that slaughtered their family and left them destitute. It's like child abuse, and they have to go into prostitution to make a living, and it's rather grim. And then you have Tadanobu Asano's character, who's a really depressed Ronin who is out of work, and he gets involved in this town with this gang, and he's the hired bodyguard. The film is still a Kitano film because he has that unique editing style. He has that mix of comedy and brutality. It has an interesting score. It's not by Joe Hisaishi, which a lot of his other films were. It's by Kiichi Suzuki, who would go on and score the Outrage trilogy for Kitano. You know, there's like Hammond organ, a very melancholy score, some interesting different instruments going on. The film, which is violent, I would say the CGI blood does take you out of the film a little bit, but that's just a minor annoyance to me. It's a wonderful film. It's still not one of his masterpieces, but it's still a very good film and you'll have a great time. It ends with a Busby Berkeley musical number, which is just wonderful because he does something with the brother and sister that's actually quite moving at the end. Asano's performance is very insular and interior. Obviously, Kitano does Kitano things. It's just a wonderful film, and it is a Kitano film rather than just a kind of faceless remake of Zaitoichi. And then The Killing by Sakamoto, which he also appears in. These are two directors who do a fair bit of acting in their own films and also other films. Sakamoto's appeared in Takashi Miike films. Takashi Miike himself has done his fair share of Jidaigeki, from 13 Assassins to the remake of Kobayashi's Harakiri to Blade of the Immortal. So these modern Japanese masters have still had the Jidaigeki bug. Sakamoto's film is the better film. Again, so economical. Again, with Sakamoto, he seems to be able to put different genres together. There's scenes that are quite disturbing, there's scenes that are a little scary as well. Sakamoto stars who, because he's older and he has a beard, he's really kind of growing into his face and he has a kind of dignity. Obviously, when he was younger, his face was a bit more cherubic and more kind of impish, whereas with the beard and kind of, he has a kind of elegance to his performance, and he could actually be the best director actor. I'm sure I'm going to do a video about that at some point. And he comes to this farming village looking for samurai to go to Edo to help the shogun, and of course in typical Sakamoto fashion it's low budget, so they never actually go to Edo. And he meets this young samurai who's got skills but has never actually killed, which is a bit of a problem if you're a samurai. He's helping the farmers out. A bunch of roughhousing ronin are hanging about the village. The young samurai has an even younger kind of sidekick who he's training. Things escalate and bad things happen to everybody, but obviously Sakamoto himself, and again in the extras, talks about, from the Iron Age, as soon as humans found metal and started using metal as a weapon. So this fits perfectly into Sakamoto's kind of obsession throughout his films with evolutionary steps of mankind using metal or iron, whether that's incorporating it into their own bodies like Tetsuo, or it's all about identity and how the use of metal changes. Obviously this film is about the ability to kill and how that changes. It also has a kind of throwback to Seven Samurai in the sense it really encapsulates that relationship between the samurai class and the farmer class or the peasant class, and the kind of feelings of resentment and things like that between the two. It has, again, quite a lot of modern Jidaigeki, even like Miike's Jidaigeki films. It's more of a stately camera and a stately pace, whereas Sakamoto, he has scenes that are very visceral and handheld. He has wonderfully fast dolly track shots, which are really dynamic and really interesting. Again, it's a relatively short film because Sakamoto just has a really good idea of pacing and how much you really need. Kitano, as we know, is a much more kind of leisurely director as far as his shots, and again his violence is kind of told in the editing a lot of the time. The violence in Zaitoichi is more explicit in this one than his gangster films probably, but again it's a more stately paced, kind of classically framed film, whereas Sakamoto's is more dynamic. It's more kind of, like I said, visceral. It's more messy, as it would kind of be in reality. Sakamoto's film is more philosophical. It's about more things than Kitano's film. Kitano's film is just a blast. It's really enjoyable. Some people have argued that the kind of musical number at the end kind of undercuts everything that went before, but for me it's more of a, yes, this life is brutal, and yes, this life is miserable, but you have to kind of take what joy you can get from it. And he does kind of end it in a kind of more upbeat note. So I mean, in reflection, Sakamoto's film for me is the better film, as much as I love Kitano's Zaitoichi. But it proves that modern directors can do, or contemporary directors can do period films and still make it about their obsessions that go through all their other films, can still make them relevant and up to date, and two wonderful films. Obviously it helps that Kitano and Sakamoto are master filmmakers. Again, Nazar and Prod's been doing a lot of Sakamoto videos, so I would highly recommend you go check out those ones. I'm making my way through Sakamoto films again. I saw like Tetsuo a long time ago, but I recently rewatched it on Blu-ray and it looks the best it's ever looked. So I would urge you to find more Sakamoto films, as I'm doing, but again, go check out Nazar and Prod for really good Sakamoto videos. And hopefully you'll join me again for more double takes. So let me know what you think of Killing and Zaitoichi, and how well these modern masters do the Jidaigeki. And hopefully join me again for more double takes. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.